everyone. Thank you for joining Internet 2 for today's webinar, Application Streaming 101, Apps Anywhere at Purdue University, a case study. We're excited to have you with us for what promises to be an engaging and informative session. Before we get started, please note that this session is being recorded and will be shared and posted online after the event. My name is Amber Walters, and I'm the Program Manager for Industry Membership and Engagement at Internet 2. I'll be your host for today's webinar. We're joined by Internet 2 member Purdue University and Apps Anywhere Internet 2 industry member and participant in the Internet 2 Cloud Scorecard program. In today's session, we'll explore how Purdue University partnered with Apps Anywhere to simplify software delivery, reduce support overhead, and expand access to academic software on campus and remote, enabling their institution to focus more on teaching and learning and less on day-to-day technology management. We have a fantastic lineup of experts who will share their experiences, best practices, and forward-thinking strategies. Now I'll introduce and turn it over to our speakers. Sandeep Rao, Senior Director of Information Technology at Purdue IT, Doug Yeager, System and Visualization Administrator at Purdue IT. And we're also joined by Michelle Craig, Director of Marketing and Commercial Operations at Apps Anywhere, Peter Cook, Chief Operating Officer at Apps Anywhere. And with that, Michelle, take it away.
Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to your members and your community today. And of course, to Purdue for putting the time into being able to share their stories with us all today. So as Amber said, I'm Michelle, Director of Marketing here at Apps Anywhere. And I'm also joined by Pete Cook, who is on the call and will be sort of there to help with any questions you might have. So please use the chat. And we have got Q&A at the end as well to come back to and discuss any of your questions and queries. And Pete will be a fantastic asset for that too. So for those that maybe are not aware of Apps Anywhere, perhaps you haven't come across us before, if you're unfamiliar with us, then we basically challenge the notion that software application access and delivery must be complex and costly. And to do that, we've created an online platform that helps to bring together all of your software applications to be able to deliver and access those applications from one single place, no matter where that student or staff member are. What's really unique about us, Apps Anywhere, is that we are completely dedicated to higher education and the education market. We only work with education, and that means that we can really understand the challenges that you guys face, the barriers that you have in terms of what students might face when it comes to student success, and develop our products and drive innovation that help to overcome those. And we're really, really passionate about our mission. We're driven by our mission, and we really believe that students should have everything they need to succeed on their course, no matter who they are, where they are, and where they're studying from. So Apps Anywhere, we support the education sector to provide students with easy, secure access to the software tools they need to succeed anywhere and anytime. And hopefully you'll hear a bit more about how that's been applied through Purdue's story today. And because we focus so much on higher education, like I say, we really recognise and understand the challenges that the sector faces, and that massive difficulty in balancing sort of IT resource, technical IT landscapes with providing a great student experience. I'm sure everybody here is very familiar with some of these themes that you see on the slide, but we're certainly seeing a huge disparity in technical ability and what kind of devices are being brought into the education setting, from sort of very low spec or no devices at all, right through to very high spec with high technical capability. And that's incredibly hard to manage, especially when you put onto that the needs and the expectations of students, especially when we think about hybrid and more flexible learning environments, or wanting to bring their own devices to their learning. And then, of course, we're also seeing a lot of other influences from things like cybersecurity, that risk of cyber attack, for example, and that need to sort of be more efficient and effective, particularly financially, in the current climate. So these are things that we think about all of the time and very much reflect our approach in how we've built our technology and what we want to do going forward. So very simply, in simple terms, we basically have built that application to be able to bring all different delivery methods for software applications together under one roof, so that then there is a central point of access for your students to literally be able to launch applications from a one-click sort of perspective and actually be able to access those on any device and any platform. And of course, in doing that, we're helping to provide students with the kind of seamless experience that they expect without the dependency on, or in spite of where they are or what they're trying to actually access with. And like I say, we're going to see some of this in Purdue's story today. And then just lastly from me, really, you know, we really are loved by over 300 institutions globally. We work in many different countries, but we are growing rapidly in the USA. You may be on the call today and be one of our customers and see your logo on here. But it is, you know, it is an area that we are working more closely with and expanding. And it's great to have one of our customers, Purdue, here today, who've been working with us for the last 5 years and very much a valued part of our community. So that kind of leads me into sort of introducing Sandeep to take over the presentation and share what you're really here for today, which is to hear their story, their successes with using AppsAnywhere. So thank you very much.
Cool. Is it my turn? Do you all have the secret signal for me to shut up? We had that conversation earlier. I will start out by saying that when I shared with my colleagues that we were doing this, our University of Michigan colleagues said, "Aren't you a little bit late to the game? Because we started this 10 years ago." And we're like, yes, rub it in, why don't you? But anyway, I thought y'all would like to hear about that. That just happened this morning. So a really quick intro to Purdue. Purdue has a rather interesting physical layout. We have multiple campuses, so it is a system. We do consider it as 3 different campuses. We have one campus in Northwest, which is Northwest Indiana, which is in Hammond, Indiana. We have a campus in Fort Wayne. And then the West Lafayette and Indianapolis areas, even though they're separated geographically by about 60, 70 miles or so, are considered the same campus in terms of granting degrees. A key part to the story is that we have about 8 statewide locations where there are degree granting classes, courses being taught across the entire state. And that becomes a critical part to our origin story in terms of AppsAnywhere. We have about 65,000 students all in all, and that's not including our sister entity, which is Purdue Global, which is another 35,000. The other odd thing about Purdue IT, which is a little bit different than most other higher ed ITs, is that we have undergone a centralization over the past 2.5, 3 years. So now the entire IT organization rolls into one umbrella. With that comes the need to try and make it not only customizable for the people who need it, but also supportable by a centralized group. So there's the duality of needing to be nimble as well as providing something that will scale for 65,000 students. So that's really where we got into it. And I'm going to ask for your pardon while I do the standard next slide, please thing. Thank you for driving. So the key here was that the statewide locations had some very interesting things happen a few years ago. The weirdest of which was one of the faculty passing away and the coursework needing to be taught by the central campus. So we had really, at the time, of course, we were still decentralized. So we were able to do things in small, fast, nimble ways. But things like that really came to the front. And the key statement that was made was that the classes needed to be taught synchronously. Asynchronous classwork was completely, yeah, we dealt with that. We knew kind of sort of what to do with that, but the synchronous teaching was something that was getting in our way. So that was one big thing. They wanted to use the same software versions in different locations. We had different hardware in different locations. Some of them had much newer GPUs, others didn't, just because of their life cycle. And then, of course, it had to be easy to use. And if we could free up space, that would be a great thing. So, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So, the key here was that we wanted to make sure that this would be a sustainable and a useful solution. So, our thought for that really is, how straightforward is it for a faculty member to run the technology rather than spending time figuring out, oh, this doesn't work or that doesn't work? Because if you think about it, in a 50-minute chunk, right, 5 minutes is 10% of your class time. If you spend 5 minutes trying to figure out how to work the technology, you're eating into your class time greatly. That's not really a good thing. The other thing we had to figure out was the wide variety of hardware that people were bringing in. And so Purdue, again, being a heavy STEM school, our biggest uses are in the polytechnic and the engineering colleges. They have a high need for high GPU needs in basically their software delivery. That being said, a significant subset of software that we try to deliver to our users, I think can only be described as painful to install and use. They're very powerful pieces of software, but they are horrendously annoying. I can guarantee you that I can walk by somebody's office today and say something like, I don't know, abacus, and watch like people twitching slightly as the word just floats down the hallway, right? So these don't install easily. These don't deploy easily. In a lab of about 40 machines, it's completely normal for 39 machines to have the software working correctly, and the 40th machine to report that the software is working correctly, but not actually work. So that was kind of sort of the landscape that we were looking at. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So the one other thing that I will say is that we did a very counterintuitive thing when we decided that we were going to start down this process. I know it's going to sound like an absolute magical thing that nobody's tried before, but we actually sat down with faculty and instructors and asked them, what do you want to do? How do you want to do this? What would make sense? And so when they started talking about what they wanted, we really did a very high level gathering of required features, right? Not at the level of, can you write it down in terms of an RFI, but in terms of, how do you expect to be teaching? What do you expect? What software do you expect to put on the screen? How do you expect your students to interact with this? Do you want them to be able to share the screens? How do you want them to submit homework? And then when we talked about it amongst the Big Ten, our colleagues at Michigan kind of looked at us funny and go, we'd solved this problem, right? And so what we did was we started talking with them, and we decided that we wanted to follow down their path, but slightly parallelly. And then that's how we started. Our pilot ran with the CGT department. The CGT department is computer graphics, and as you can imagine, they are very heavy lifters in terms of software needs. And then, I covered this already. I should have probably signaled for the next one. But really, that's the mindset that we went in with, where the single lodestone that we had, like our North Star, was, how can we get our faculty and instructors to do what they need to do without us getting in their way? How can we be true partners, true supporters, be the safety net, be all of the tools that they need to do their job, because at the end of the day, the work they do helps me pay my mortgage. And I kind of like that. So that's really where we went down with this. And Doug, you were new at that time, correct? Didn't you just about start, or maybe?
No, I had been here for 4 years at that time.
So goes to show, this is what happens when somebody lasts a while in a place, where somebody who's been there 10 years is still, in my mind, newish at the time. But so that's really where we got into, and that brings me to a really good segue into what Doug's role was in actually setting this up, rolling this out, making sure that, for example, we had a way to figure out how to deliver the content. So, for example, Doug and a couple of other people sat down with the faculty members and said, look, this is the first time we're ever going to do this. How are we going to deliver this information? So they came up with the idea that the first week, along with syllabi and talking about, how the course is structured, one of the assignments was how to figure out how to use the software. And that kind of is a brilliant segue to, for me to toss it to Doug, who actually did all the work and allowed me to walk away with about 25% of the credit. So thank you, Doug. This is a public acknowledgement of the work you've done. So don't you dare turn around and go, oh, you never do a thing for me. So.
All right. Thank you, Sandeep. As Sandeep said, it was the summer of 2020 is when we started this, which, as everyone saw, knows that was great timing. We had already planned, I think, starting in May, June of doing the installations with AppsAnywhere. And, with COVID going on, it rolled right into everything. We had weekly meetings with the professors as we were setting this up. We were trying it out, going through everything. Started creating knowledge base articles on how to use it, how to install it, some common troubleshooting tips that we found out on, how to collect the logs when there's a problem, how to open a case when there's a problem, everything they need. So we had created a little knowledge base article, which you can see on the screen, of where you can go, the students were given a link to, and they could go and click on everything that they wanted. Classes were told now that they're sent out for some classes, they're sent the link to AppsAnywhere, they're given the link for the KB, and they're told, be prepared for your first day of class of how to use the software, make sure the client's installed, make sure you know how to access it. You can log in, you're familiar with it. That way they can get in and utilize lab time and class time. Especially right now we have May semesters going on, so it's a condensed semester worth of classes that are meeting, and that's critical for them that first day of class to be able to hit the ground running. Next slide. So mentioned a little bit about this with COVID. One of the other weird things we were able to do with it is there's a class we have. I don't remember which major it's in. Sandeep can chime in with it, where they have to find the tensile strength of like metal bars and things like that and kind of bend them. And what they had done is they wrote a program during COVID in order to simulate the labs of doing this. So we utilized AppsAnywhere to push it out to where they could run this piece of software to do their labs that they couldn't do in person in the classes. Oh, that was
materials engineering.
Materials engineering. We use remote desktop servers using Parallels with GPU backing. At Purdue, we also have a Citrix environment, but as Sandeep had covered earlier, with the high needs of CGT and engineering with these CAD programs and heavy loading, we needed GPU backing. And our current Citrix environment didn't provide the GPU support. So we use Parallels with servers that have GPU backing. This allowed us to handle a couple things. So for the Mac devices, like our aviation technology department, when some of their students were taking some of these classes, they love the fact they could use their Macs to do the software that is needed that's Windows only without having to do anything else. It's also allows the machines that if you have a computer at home that doesn't have a discrete GPU, we can detect that with AppsAnywhere, and we can push you over to Parallels to give you a device that has the discrete GPU to give you that experience. We also can look at like what type of memory someone has. If they have, if someone for some reason only has maybe 4 or 8 gigs on their computer, and we know for that application that they're going to need, 8, 16 gigs of RAM to run it, we can also redirect them to other resources that would have the needs for their uses. Next slide. So we use this to bridge kind of the gap between a lot of our areas. So one of the nice features with AppsAnywhere is we can publish out all the various ways to access an application. So internally, we have some places where students can go to download software. So we have the link published in there where they can either launch it or they can change it, and it will take them straight to the page where they can download it. For some of our software, there's a web version. We have a link there that'll take them straight to the web version. We have integrated our Citrix environment in here. So if they're not logged into Citrix workspaces, it'll take them straight to our Citrix HTML5 page to log in and launch the apps. If they are logged in to Citrix workspaces, it'll launch the Citrix app natively. So we've been trying to use this in CGT and engineering as kind of more of like a single pane of glass for the students to be able to go to and have access to everywhere they need. And depending on the computer they're on, it will only show them the options that are available to them. So if they're not on a Windows device, they won't get the option to stream it and use their local hardware. They'll be presented with all the other options.
If I might really jump in real quick, the bullet point specifically about the support staff struggling. The interesting thing there was that a part of that struggle was because it took them a little bit of time to figure out where they needed to troubleshoot. Because of the single pane of glass environment, they sometimes would troubleshoot the local machine when the actual issue was something that they needed to escalate behind the scenes and get us to fix behind the scenes. So once people figured out, oh, there's multiple ways you can invoke the software, then immediately the spice started flowing, so to speak. So yeah, back to you.
Yeah, and along the lines of support, I had a support staff member just this last month or so just tell me that it's been great lately. It's, AppsAnywhere, when people come in and launch the applications, we typically get a handful of people at the beginning of the year that have issues, and 9 times out of 10, it's just reboot your computer and everything starts working fine. But it's eased their issues with people complaining about software not working. It's a more consistent experience for them. Along with the software repackaging, we do have to package software a little differently this way, because we do use Config Manager on some of our labs, and it's Config Manager available for the whole campus. What our packagers tend to do is they open up the Cloud Paging Studio and they just install the application via the Config Manager package that they have, because it's already scripted to do everything it needs. Close up the Cloud Paging Studio, and they might have to make some minor final touches to it, but it's basically reutilizing how they had packaged everything before using this new technology. And the one thing I like about it, and I know some of the professors and the people that are paying the bills like to see the metrics and the usage, and within the analytics, it does give a nice flow of how things are going. So it's been interesting looking at our 5-year growth within AppsAnywhere of the usage case. And I find it interesting looking at the months that it's heavily utilized. And then it also breaks it down by like time of day. So there's a lot of those peaks and valleys, and you can definitely tell when heavy labs are happening versus when they're not. And you can always tell when people are cramming to get their assignments turned in right before due dates, because there's always a spike on Friday nights, it seems like, right before everyone wants to enjoy their weekends. And next slide, please. So as we were looking to integrate the new Purdue University Indianapolis campus, one of the problems we had is not all the classes were going to be in Purdue University labs. If it was previously, it was a shared campus between Indiana University and Purdue University. And so it was a big shared space with kind of the split of the teaching down there, of splitting it more into the two universities. There are areas that are Purdue only specific, and there are areas that are Indiana University specific. So with the first semester of everything rolling out, there were a lot of labs that were being taught in kind of general Indiana University locations. And the concern there was, they did not want Purdue students launching Indiana University software and getting their licenses, just like we wanted them to get our licenses, because that's, you don't want to have to deal with all of that. So what we decided to do was utilize AppsAnywhere for this, and that the students could launch the application. It would connect to the Purdue licensing servers, and it would grab the Purdue licenses. So it eliminated that need. We worked with the IT department at Indiana University, and they pushed out the AppsAnywhere client to all of their labs. So any Purdue University student that's taking classes down there could go into any of their open labs and be able to launch Purdue software. So it was really nice. Professors had a big concern about how they were going to do all of this in these shared labs, and it allowed them to have confidence that they were using the Purdue software. And when students were going off campus, or if they happened to take the shuttle up to the main campus and launch software, it would be all the same experience. Next slide, please. Currently, we have about 303 applications that are active and published right now. As I had mentioned earlier, we do have applications that are tied into our Citrix environment. So that everything in Citrix is now published out through AppsAnywhere. I had already talked about how we have links to everything else that we do, but we do have some software that is restricted by either geolocation or by departments. So there are some software, say chemical engineering, pays for their students in order to access. With AppsAnywhere, we have Active Directory groups where those students are put in, and that process of populating these groups is a process that we've automated. So every semester when our class feeds switch, if a student has dropped out of chemical engineering, they'll get pulled out of that group. And so we can restrict access launches based on these Active Directory groups, so they no longer can launch the software that they want. We can also put restrictions on, how often the software can sit, because when you stream it down, it can sit on the files, move down to your local machine, but we can put limitations on how long it can sit there. And when they go to launch it, it will check to see if they still have a valid license in order to launch it. So we don't have to worry about a student, coming in the last day of being a student, downloading all the software and taking off and, utilizing Purdue's licenses somewhere else. And one of the things our packagers have really enjoyed is the automated app licensing templates. This is something where AppsAnywhere will package the software for you. Basically, it's a package they provide to you. And all you have to do when you download it is follow the instructions and how you're supposed to enter your license key. We put in our license keys, server name, IP address, ports. It has what it needs in there, and it's basically done. So stuff like SolidWorks as an application is something that we don't have to package anymore. AppsAnywhere provides the package free of charge for us to download. We just got to provide our own licensing for it. And that's been something that we've been trying to utilize as much as possible. And I know our packagers really, really enjoy that. I also know some of our applications that we do that has really helped is for some of these with the licensing, it can be the same licensing for, I don't know, like 5 or 6 applications. And you can do dependencies. So we have a master license package that comes down first for all these applications. So it pulls the license down via this package, and then it will launch afterwards the software that they wanted. And this has greatly reduced the amount of work it needs. Like if we need to change licenses, we just have that one package to change versus having to change 6 or 7 that are all tied to that. And that's been a huge help once we actually utilized AppsAnywhere's packaging service to help us get that package done and accomplished and working well. And I know the colleague of mine who uses it he's just been extremely happy with how well it's worked and how much work it has reduced him having to do. Next slide. So looking ahead, we're looking at various VDI solutions, and we're looking at potentially using AppsAnywhere to help control our VDI spend. The way we see that with that is if you can launch it on your local workstation, you can launch it there. If you can't, we offload you to where it needs to be. So the hope is we're spending less on our VDI infrastructure because we're launching it less. I know with Parallels, that first week of classes when everyone has to launch everything all the ways, like the professor does, the Parallel servers get hammered. And then after that, it's just the people that need it are the only ones accessing it. So that first week's a little rough with, the amount of people that are hitting all of the data center type stuff. But after that, it seems to be really nice. The other thing that's really nice is, as I mentioned before, is having a single place to go to access everything. That is I get confused myself trying to figure out where software is. Other faculty members are sometimes wondering where software is, and having a place to go, you can just point everyone to one place and go launch it. And that's kind of what we've been trying to do within engineering and Polytechnic for those that are using it, is just, go here, launch it, and make it easier. And then we're also looking to make all the technology similar. As Sandeep said, we had been doing everything got centralized. So we're working as Purdue IT to kind of make everything homogeneous, everything kind of the same, no matter where you're at, to make it easier. And that's one of the things that potentially we're looking at using AppsAnywhere to do in the future. Next slide.
So I will jump in and say right now the thing that that we have is about it's about a quarter of campus. So if we exclude Purdue Northwest and Purdue Fort Wayne, and just look at Indy and West Lafayette, we're talking about a quarter of that who are currently using it. So as this progresses, the next step is, of course, does it make sense to scale it out completely? So that's the question at hand. We'll have to go through the business case. We'll have to sit down with the architects, figure out whether that makes sense. And that's the next big step that we'll do. And finally, I will just end with one little tidbit. As we were working on this presentation over the last few days, we reached out to our colleague in Indianapolis and said, hey, Rob, how's AppsAnywhere working out for you? Anything, would you like to add anything to this? And the first thing he says, we don't even finish what we're trying to do. He goes, why are you asking questions about this? Are you planning to take it away from me? And we're like, no, we just want to present it. Oh, in that case, that's fine. So, that those kinds of very small things do make a difference in terms of letting us know that it is appreciated and used widely. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with everybody. So we've got a little bit of time to open up to some questions or anything, any comments or feedback you might want to make. And obviously here's an opportunity to pick the brains of two experienced users. So if anybody wants to put it in the chat or turn on the mic, I presume that's okay to do, then that would be amazing. Very quiet. Well, just to get us going, in case people are just having to think about what
this is a classroom scenario. I should be allowed to call on people, right?
Yeah. Well, we could pick on people. So we have it looks like there's a question that's coming to the Q&A. How many applications do you have to package manually versus using the templates from AppsAnywhere? So what does that split look like?
That's a good question. It depends on the application. I know off the top of my head, I know we use SolidWorks, there's GIS, I don't know the total number of that to do that. I don't know if Pete knows how many templated software you have available to everyone.
Yeah, we've got, I think it's well over 100 at this point, and it's typically all of the heavyweight engineering apps at the least, plus things like Adobe and a lot of the usual suspects, in Vivo, MATLAB, all the ones that you kind of expect to see in education. We try and pre-package those, as well as a lot of open source apps and other apps that are commonly used.
There was a question that came up in chat. Can you speak to the IT staff support required, count and skills? Doug?
Well, for the backend support, it's basically been me. We have 2 people that have been packaging applications for engineering and Polytechnic. For support, it's been going through our normal support channels. For the skill required, it's something they kind of will learn how to do when it comes in. Common problems that we've seen personally is it's a little more complex on the BYOD machines because it's obviously not a controlled computer. You can't just remote into it and access it. And a lot of those are just easy to resolve when the students show up with the machine. And from my experience with them is the students, when you tell them, can you please, uninstall and reinstall the application, they don't really understand what uninstalling is. And so once you walk through them, the process of uninstalling and then clicking it again and letting it do the install, it all seems to work fine. That's kind of where.
Could you speak, so to go back to that question, could you speak to the skill set specifically that, so for example, Alan, Sean are probably the people you're talking about in terms of packaging, right? So you need to have people who know how to package things for something. It doesn't matter what that thing may be. If one knows how to package those things, then those skills transfer over pretty easily. And then what part of your skill set did you use for this, Doug? Would you say that it was your virtualization portion, your hardware skills? Supposing you were in my position and not allowed to do real work, who would, and you had to set this up from scratch, what kind of people would you hire?
Yeah, I was a system administrator. I mean, I was hired into Purdue to do VDI and system administration originally. So I have experience on that. I also did, a lot of virtualization on VMware and things like that. So for me, for the backend stuff, you need to know a little bit of server administration. We did create group policies to, restrict a bunch of things on the RDSH servers. AppsAnywhere has a KB on what they recommend for doing that. They provide templates for you for GPOs in order to do things for, cloud paging in order to change the way that works, to point it to the ID for the campus, to mark things as a university-owned machine, because you can restrict things on launching just on a university-owned machine versus a personal machine if need be. If license restrictions do that, it's all it is just a registry key you set and it determines that. So if you don't have the knowledge, being able to follow the KBs that are provided by AppsAnywhere is useful. And my support, when I've run into problems, I've had no issues with AppsAnywhere. I've had to call them a couple times when I, forgot to change a password before it expired on me, and I had to call them to be able to get in and just put my new password in for me. And the response on that was really quick. But they're always willing to help do a screen share session to go over things. Upgrades are wonderful. They answer so many questions when they're going through it. They explain what they're doing. You don't ever feel like it's, black magic happening in the background.
Yeah, and it's probably worth noting as well that, yeah, we do have the support function. We also have a training academy and training services there available as well. At the end of the day, it's knowing what you're doing with this and it going well is what makes it all successful. So it's really important to us that everybody gets that. There's another question here, which is quite interesting around kind of how you justify the business case for the technology. So it's kind of saying, you know, is it just looking at reduced costs? You know, how do you phrase the benefits to financial budget folks?
Sure.
I think there's quite a lot of points of ROI in that sense, isn't there?
Yes. Oh, that's a huge question, right? And that's really cutting at the heart of some of the things that we have to look at. So we will say that because of the way we started having these conversations, the faculty were driving the initial uptake. Because the faculty were driving the initial uptake, for us, it was a question of how can we help them do what they need to do? So it wasn't an IT push at all. It was very clearly coming from a group who said, we want to get this done. How do we get this done? And this is, you know, we came up with ideas and options. So that's how the initial uptake happened. Now, when we're talking about having the larger question, the larger question of how do we support all of the campus, the kinds of things that we have to take into account are precisely the sub questions listed there, which are, you know, how do we balance the reduced cost versus. So for this particular case, what we're trying to do is we're not trying to say this is going to reduce our costs, but we're going to be looking at this in terms of what's the cost benefit analysis? How does it reduce overhead? How does it reduce things like downtime? How does it reduce friction for the instructional mission of the university? And that's the lens through which we'll be looking at it. Because at the end of the day, right, we're talking about, okay, we have a hospital. We're talking about, oh, you know, should we use number 2 suturing silk or number 3 suturing silk? We're not talking about not having suturing silk at all and using super glue inside of you know, somebody's surgery, right? It has to be analyzed. There has to be some kind of a benefit to it. But we are attempting to try and capture the intangibles as well as the very clear cost analysis that goes in, right? Do we have laptop requirements? Different universities have different statements. Purdue does not have a requirement for their undergrads coming in. We do have recommendations and suggestions, but sometimes people don't have machines that can hit those. So how do we deal with that? We cannot tell people to come in with discrete GPUs on laptops, right? That's a little bit absurd. So it's those kinds of things that we have to capture as a narrative as well as just clean numbers. Now, don't get me wrong. If the numbers don't line up, then the conversation is kind of not going anywhere. But providing numbers without a narrative, in my experience, has been useless. So that's how we plan to do this, right? And at the end of the day, the Excel spreadsheets, as we all know, rule the world. But we're hoping to have at least some kind of word art or something in the sheet that might help tell the story better.
Yeah, and I think just to speak to that a little bit as well, we talk about kind of all the different points of value in what we're doing here, and there are many that cover lots of areas, from reducing costs and time, being able to actually assess your software application landscape, maybe reduce license costs, things like that. But I think some of the things that really hit me when I'm speaking with institutions is things like saying, you know, a couple of our students who've withdrawn this year have actually put down the reason for leaving is that they can't access the applications they need to do their coursework. You know, that's a real retention issue. And frankly, you know, we should be supporting every student to have the tools they need to be as successful as they can. And, you know, I think those kind of use cases are really important, and back up, I guess, what Sandeep is saying there about, you know, it's the quality of the experience that you're giving to the students and the ability you're giving them to actually have you know, the most success. And I think that's very important to kind of what we stand for as well. So yep. It's kind of at the heart of everything.
I saw one question fleet by and disappear, having to do with licensing, asking about whether licensing is any easier. And the answer to that is not in my experience. The licensing has always been something that we have to work our way through with the individual software companies. Some are much more amenable than others. Some will actually bend over backwards just because we're higher ed. Others just don't care. But it's been a hit or miss. It's not been a given that the large software companies behave one way and the small ones behave another. It just, I think, goes with the culture of the software company, and how protective they are, or how pointed they are about their licensing schemes. So
Yeah, there's one piece of software we don't publish out, but it is published in AppsAnywhere to launch the local version if it's installed, and that's Adobe. And we also do that with the Office products, is you can still launch it there, but you can tell it to look for the local version and launch the local version. So we do that with Adobe because our students have a shared license, and the way the license reads to us is we're not allowed to stream any of it. And so we have decided not to try to push that. So we don't publish that. I also do want to say I do know at least one software vendor that had called out AppsAnywhere as an allowable way to stream their software, which I thought that was interesting. It was actually called out in their whole terms of, for things you can and can't do, AppsAnywhere was listed as something that was okay to do with their software.
I love that.
I'll just add to what you guys have said there. The reason why often it's allowed by some of these big software vendors is because we do it in a very, very different way to most of the technology on the market. So we're not actually using, in the majority of cases, any kind of desktop virtualization. The application typically, where possible, which is hopefully more than 90% of the cases, streams directly and runs on the endpoint. So a lot of the time, and we've got white papers around this, when you explain that to the software vendors, that it's not a single desktop that loads of students are accessing in an attempt to try and circumnavigate the licensing restrictions. Once you explain to them actually that you've got the controls to push out these applications to be compliant with the license, then typically they're a lot more receptive to what the concept is once they understand they're going to still get their money, basically.
Right.
And at the same time, you can use the analytics to make sure that all marries up with what you're paying for, how it's being used, you know, and be able to analyze things on that level at a glance. Okay, so I don't see any more questions in the Q&A chat right now. So I was just going to ask one last question, but any advice or recommendations for anybody who is thinking about embarking on a journey like this?
I would just say, don't be afraid to reach out to support if you have questions. There's a lot of documentation they have on their support panel. There's user forums that they have where people are able to post questions. They take feedback. I've requested some things and I've been told, you know, we're looking into it. There's places where you can go vote on, you know, what you would like to see them to do in the future. They've been pretty responsive to issues or questions or just things that have popped up. And you know, I'm willing to chat to anyone that wants to reach out through things if they have questions. I know I've talked to other universities about it. We've talked to other engineering schools. I'll tell you, you know, how it is, you know, where we might struggle or where we did struggle. We talked a little bit about that before, you know, in some of the slides with some documentation was lacking. We made that better. Support was rough at first. We made that better. It's, as we've learned through it, it's become easier to support and it's become easier to do. And I've had professors just like take a CAD class just over the summer and then come back and say, I want this for my class. You know, it's, as much as, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm just trying to sell all this, but it does speak for itself when you use it and how it works. And it hasn't been much of a trouble to support on the back end.
Yeah, and my thing there is you know, the reason I think it is as seamless and as quiet and kind of well-oiled as it is right now is because we did not approach this as an IT problem. We didn't try to do this as a technological solution. We tried to approach this as a way to solve a problem that the instructors had. So we looked at it from their perspective as opposed to making things easier for us. It just so happened that things got easier for us. But at the end of the day, if things were more difficult for us and made things easier for them, we'd have done it anyway. Right? So that's really how I think approaching this makes the most sense. And trying to do it from a purely an IT perspective to make our lives easier is pointless. Right? That's a very short-lived thing. That's true for this and for anything else, right? It doesn't just limit itself to app streaming. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. Buy-in is good.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That's really useful feedback. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Amber to kind of round us off. But obviously, you know, today you've had a little bit of an insight into the world of AppsAnywhere and the application of that. But there's probably lots of more questions and maybe you want to see how it works. So there are ways to find out more, have a demo, things like that. Amber's going to talk a little bit more about how to get more information. And obviously we are all available for contact as well, and we'd love to speak to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to all of our speakers today. And thank you for joining us. We hope you found this session valuable and packed with insights you can take back to your own institutions. If you would like more information or have questions, feel free to reach out directly to any of the speakers using their provided contact details on the presentation slides. And to learn more about AppsAnywhere, see how their solution aligns with your needs and procurement goals, and view their listing and self-assessment in the Internet 2 Cloud Scorecard, follow the link on the presentation slides or visit the Cloud Scorecard Finder on the Internet 2 website at internet2.edu. A recording of this webinar will be available, so keep an eye out if you'd like to revisit the content or share it with colleagues. And finally, be sure to visit our website for details on upcoming events and opportunities to engage and collaborate with peers. And until next time, stay connected with the Internet 2 community. Thank you.